Good morning, everybody. It is day 3 of our Easter devotional. If you haven't already had a chance, you can go back and watch day 1 and 2. But I've got my two helpers with me, Isla and Iain, and we've been talking about the Bible story. In day 1, we heard that God made an absolutely perfect world, and it was perfect because He was the
King.
Good job, guys. He was the king. And as long as everybody did what the king said was best, the world would always be perfect. But yesterday, day 2, we talked about our world today, and it's not perfect. We don't get on perfectly with creation. There's lots of dangerous things out there, and people get sick. We don't get on perfectly with each other the way we should, because people fight and they say nasty things to each other and they don't treat each other with kindness. And we don't get on perfectly with God. We don't get on perfectly with God. And so something went wrong. What went wrong, Iain?
Adam and Eve picked the fruit that they was told not to.
They took the fruit they were told not to. Instead of doing what the king said was best, they decided they were going to do what they thought was best, what they wanted. And that's what sin is. Instead of doing what God has told us is the best, we do what we want instead. And that breaks. That's what broke the world. But you know what? Our Bible doesn't stop at Genesis chapter 3. In fact, there's a lot more pages that come. And it talks about a lot of different things in those pages, but there's two things about God that come up all the time. And the first thing is, and I want you to try and remember this, God is just. Isla, can you say that? God is just. Iain, can you say that? God is just. God is just. Now, what does that mean? Isla, what does it mean that God is just?
He punishes people. He punishes wrong.
Good. Because God is just, you think of a judge in court. He loves what is right, but he also must punish what is wrong. So God, because he is God, he has to deal with wrong. He can't ignore it. He can't pretend it didn't happen. He has to punish wrong. But the second characteristic we read so much in the Bible about God is that he is gracious. Can you say that, Iain?
Gracious.
Gracious. Can you say that, Isla?
Gracious.
Gracious. God is gracious. Now, what does that mean, Isla?
It means he's kind to people. He's kind to everybody that sins.
That does wrong. Yeah, he's not to everybody. He shows kindness and he shows love to many people who do wrong. Because God is gracious, he still loves to show kindness to undeserving people who've done wrong things. So God is, what was our first word?
Gracious.
No.
Just.
Good, Iain. Good memory. Good. God is just. And our second word, God is
Gracious.
Gracious. So God is just and God is gracious. And we see that all the way through the Bible. In fact, in Genesis 3, this chapter where Adam and Eve did do sin, they disobeyed God and did what they want instead of what God said was best. We read that God shows he's just because he punishes them. He sends them out of the garden. But in the same chapter, we see God also is gracious because in Genesis 3:15, he promises that he's going to send one who will crush the serpent's head. In other words, there would be one who would come, a person who would live in this world, who would deal with Satan, and who would fix this problem of sin and wrong in this world. So someone that would fix it. So even though Adam and Eve had done wrong in that chapter, God punished them, he also showed grace. He was gracious. In the very next chapter, Genesis chapter 4, we read a story about two boys. Do you remember their names?
Cain and Abel.
Good, the sons of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. And the story says that Cain and Abel both grew up, and Abel, he loved God, and he offered the right sacrifices to God. And Cain really loved himself more, and he did something really, really yucky. Iain, what was it?
He killed his brother.
Good, you guys are answering great this time. You're doing good jobs. He killed his brother. That's really sad. Really yucky. And so because God is, what was our first word, Isla?
Gracious.
No.
Just.
Just. Because God is just, He had to punish the wrong. And he came in and he sent Cain even further away from the family. He punished the wrong. But the second word, Isla, was God is?
Gracious.
God is gracious. And that means that he shows kindness even to people who do wrong. And in that chapter, he put a mark on Cain. We're not told what the mark was, but he put a mark on Cain to protect him and to keep him safe. Even though Cain didn't deserve to be looked after, God still looked after Cain because God is both just and gracious. Then in Genesis chapter 5, we have a really weird chapter because we read that somebody lived and then they died, and then somebody else lived and then they died, and somebody else lived and then they died, and somebody else lived and then they died, and somebody else lived and then they died. And then it goes on and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on, and every single person, they died. They died. And remember, God is, what was our first word? Just. So Isla, how are we seeing God being just in that chapter?
Because they sinned and that's their punishment, to die.
To die. Remember in the garden, God said, if you eat the fruit, Adam and Eve, you will surely die. And in Genesis 5, because everybody in this world keeps sinning, they will surely die. Well, that's a problem that is in this world. People die. But you know what? Right at the middle of the chapter, there's an amazing story about somebody who escaped death. And he did this.
With God.
What was his name?
Yeah,
you're close. No, not Eha.
Enoch.
Good. Enoch. Enoch walked with God. And because he walked with God, God took him out of this world. He escaped death. And he was taken to be with God forever. In the very next chapter, Genesis 6, actually goes all the way through to Genesis 9. There's another amazing story. And Iain, it's the story, do you remember your Bible? It's a story on the front cover of your Bible. It's about a man. What was his name? Do you remember? Who's the picture in your front of your Bible?
No, not Moses.
Not Moses. It's
somebody that built the ark.
Somebody that built the ark. And it's Noah. Good job. You got there. It was Noah. And in that story, God is, what was our first word, Isla?
Not.
God is just. God is just. So he has to punish wrong. How did God punish wrong in that chapter?
He sent
the flood to punish people because they were all doing what they wanted instead of what the king said was best. But he also showed he was gracious. How did he show he was gracious?
He saved people who don't deserve.
Yeah, he saved a family, Noah and his family in the ark. So the Bible all the way through talks about how God will punish wrong and how God will show kindness to many people who have done wrong. Now those two things don't normally fit together, but God has a plan about how he can deal with and punish wrong and yet still show so much love and so much kindness to people who do wrong. And tomorrow we're going to have to put on our detective hats and we're going to look at the clues in the Old Testament to find out who this person that would come would be and what he would be like. So join us tomorrow, detectives, for a careful investigation.